Hello, my name is Amelia. If you recognize me, you likely follow me on TikTok. My username there is Confused Prairie Girl. A few people had asked if I would be making a YouTube. I guess I'm trying. I'll see how the reception to this video is. I am not very good at making videos in a longer format, so please bear with me and feel free to offer constructive critique. Since one thing that I do very frequently on TikTok is clown on the Donner Party, I thought it would be interesting to do a story time. I can't tell the story in like every single detail because it's a very, very long and convoluted story. I tried to simplify it a bit and I hope it does make sense. I hope you enjoy the video. I've never done this before. Please be kind. I live in California and our AC is broken, so it's very hot. I've already applied sunscreen. In California, the UV rays, they're very strong. So it's essential to apply sunscreen every day, every few hours, even if you're inside most of the day as I am, quarantine. I'm also taking antibiotics for my mask-induced acne. My skin is extremely sensitive, and so just wearing the mask really inflames my skin. So that makes me more prone to sunburning too. So sunscreen, I used this Seed and Tree sun cushion. It's okay. It's like convenient to bring on the go, like you can kind of touch it up over light makeup. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Donner Party. I am definitely going to leave some stuff out just by accident. There's a lot of information about the Donner Party, and I kind of wanted to summarize it a little bit into a reasonable degree. I wanted to shorten it down a little bit to more bite-sized. I wanted to summarize it. Okay. If you have taken an American history course, you might know about Manifest Destiny. This was a period in which a lot of Americans decided that they wanted to move west. I'm using a Can Make primer. I really like it. It kind of blurs my features out a little bit. So during this time, a lot of Americans were moving west, trying to aim for Oregon or California for the most part. Our particular group was comprised mostly of the Donner and the Reed family, more officially called the Donner-Reed Party. And I wanted to talk about some key players before getting into the story itself. Just some names to be on the lookout for. First, I'd like to introduce to you Louis Keseberg. I don't know how to say his last name. Keseberg. He was known as probably the nastiest guy in the Donner Party. He was described by other Donner Party members as being just absolutely foul. They used the word deranged, antisocial. He was extremely abusive to his wife Elizabeth and their 3-year-old daughter. His wife was pregnant at the time of the Donner Party. He was just all around a nasty guy, and you will see throughout the story that his nastiness progresses. He was recorded as being a nasty guy to begin with, even before all of this happened. Next up, we have William and Eleanor Eddy. William was the only skilled hunter of the group, so you can imagine he was extremely helpful. He was known as a pretty friendly, kind guy. He was also known as a liar, though, so people were kind of, do we trust him, do we not? His wife, Eleanor, was very dedicated to the children. Later on in the story, we'll see her working really hard to keep not only her children alive, but other children who had been orphaned. She had 2 children, James and Margaret. Sorry, I keep looking over here for my notes. I don't have all of this memorized to a degree. Next up are 2 people who don't often get mentioned in this story. We have Salvador and Louis. They were Miwok Native Americans, which is why they are not often mentioned. Unfortunately, due to racism and a lot of anti-Native American sentiment, their involvement in the story has been overlooked or purposefully ignored or erased. And so there's very little information on them other than that they were good men who were trying to genuinely help. So their involvement in the way that I'm going to tell the story, unfortunately, is not very great because we just don't have a lot of information, but I will try and talk about them as much as as much information I've been able to dig up on them. We've got James Reed, who's a good old Irishman. He had his wife Margaret, he had a bunch of children and a stepdaughter, and also Margaret's very ill mom. The reason that James Reed and his family were going to California was because Margaret's mother, they thought, oh, maybe if she is moved to California where their climate is a little nicer than Illinois, then we will have a higher chance of her recovering from her illness. Unfortunately, this did not work. She had to be buried alongside the trail. But I think that's a nice sentiment that they were willing to make such an intense life change to, help a family member. James was experienced like wilderness men, military men, etc. in the Donner Party, so you would think he would be one of the leader types. He was unfortunately kind of a nasty guy, like personality-wise. He had some bad attitude. My camera fell. Manifest destiny. Everybody's moving west. Everybody wants to get to Oregon and California. It's really important to me to talk about how we recognize the ramifications of something like that, of how white settlers essentially came in and just took land from Native Americans, such as Louis and Salvador, who we'll talk about in a bit. I recently found this really cool service that helps you find which Native American tribe was living on the land that you currently live on. If you text 907-312-5085, if you text this number with your city and then your state, then they will respond within a few minutes telling you which American tribe resided there. I just think that's really cool, can help you be a little more knowledgeable, be aware of the land that you're residing on, maybe find some good ways to pay reparations. Our story officially begins in April of 1846. I'm going to start putting on foundation. I'm really big on cushion foundation. This is the current one I have. This one's kind of a medium coverage. I just blend it out pretty sheerly. The Donner and Reed parties, who both wanted to move west, decided to team up. Safety in numbers. There were a lot of dangerous things along the trail, and it was just so much smarter to group together. Look at the difference. So they left Illinois. They were heading to California on the Oregon Trail. They were around 33 people at this point. By the time they got to Missouri, they paused briefly and joined forces with a larger wagon train. By the end of May, it was going okay. It wasn't going great, but it also was not a easy trip for anyone. They successfully crossed the Big Blue River of Kansas, which I think is its real name. They had their first death, which was really unfortunate, but unfortunately that is part of trail life for pioneers. It's not an easy trip. I'm going to be doing just a little bit of shading around my eyes using this Can Make Velvety Fit Colors. Oh, that is truly not showing up on my eye. Oh, you can see it in camera. Maybe if I try with my finger. Next to no pigment, that's fine. It does seem to be a little more successful with my finger. I think I do want to deepen it just a little bit. I'm going to take a mini Can Make blush and eyeshadow palette that I have, and I'm going to dip into it's broken. Sick. The whole thing just broke. I'm going to dip into the dark brown color. Put it. Ooh, pigment! And then I will blend that out. The palette literally did break. So this is where things started to go wrong for the Donner Party. There was a guy, a veteran migrant, if you will, named Lansford Hastings. He had written a book on how to get to California. He talked about this shortcut called the Hastings Cutoff. He had not actually taken that shortcut before. He just kind of looked at a map and been like, oh, this looks like a great idea. Come July, the Donner Reed group decided to once again break into smaller chunks because some of the people really wanted to try the Hastings Cutoff and some of them really did not. And the people who didn't, talk about foresight. George Donner is elected the leader of the group that is going to take the Hastings Cutoff. Go George. So now there's 74 people. They crossed the Salt Desert in September, and this is where they started having problems. They were running really low on food. They were realizing like, hey, the clock is ticking, it's September. This is getting to be kind of late in the year to be making this journey. The death toll started to rise. James Reed's family was hit the strongest, and so he started becoming more irate and described by the others as kind of bossy. I think I also would be kind of freaked out if my family were like doing really badly on the trail. I wasn't there, I can't tell you what he was like. I can just tell you that others thought he was being kind of mean. I am going to use this Tony Moly gel eyeliner in Cocoa Brown. As a painter, I just really like being able to apply it with a little wee brush. I'm going to be going for a very, very thin line. Come October, tensions were really starting to rise with the Donner Party. That's pretty late in the year to be stranded in the Midwest with nothing. James Reed and another man in the Donner Party got into a fight. The other man started attacking him physically. There are records that he hit James first. Margaret tried to intervene, James's wife. He retaliated by hitting her as well. So that infuriated James Reed. And so he started beating this other man so intensely that he murdered him. He killed him. They were like, shoot, what do we do about this? It was kind of up to George Donner to decide, but he had gone ahead for a day. So what the group ended up doing was deciding to just banish James Reed. Don't worry, he'll come back. And left him wandering around in, I believe, Utah with no food, no water. Essentially, like, you're gonna die. His stepdaughter, she rode ahead and would be providing food for him for at least a little bit to keep him alive. Thank you, Virginia. So kind. Got it in my eye. Another thing to note about the James Reed situation, our friend Kieseberg, the absolute asshole, he was really vocal about wanting to just like murder James Reed. He wanted to like kill the guy. Everyone was like, So, Kieseberg. November came, the snow started to fall. That's a problem when you are trying to cross a mountain range, is it not? They were still able to move forward a little bit, but it was pretty unsuccessful, and food supplies were running extremely low. This is a brown mascara from Heroine Make. I get most of my cosmetics at a Japanese cosmetics store near my home. One member of the party went ahead. It was a lot easier to travel just one person instead of carting all the families in wagon trains. And he came back actually with 2 Miwok Native Americans, Louis and Salvador, who we mentioned. Yay, them. He also came back with some food. Not much food, but a little bit of food, so that was good. Come the middle of December, 15 of the migrants, including Louis and Salvador, had decided that they were going to go ahead of the rest of the wagon train, leave the families for the most part there, while the 15 went and got help. Essentially, they were going out to get a rescue mission because they were just so stranded in the mountains. Most of the migrants left back were women with the children. There were some men, such as Kieseberg. He did not want to come on the Forlorn Hope. Shocking. Eleanor Eddy, William Eddy's wife, was one of the women who stayed back. Each woman had about 5 to 8 or 9 children each to take care of. There were a lot of orphans at this point. There were children who did go on the Forlorn Hope journey, but not a whole lot of them. On Christmas Day in 1846, a blizzard hit. Fun. While Eddie was going through his bag, he found that Eleanor had left him a half-pound of bear meat, so he lived off of that. Everybody else was starting to really have some problems in the Forlorn Hope. This is a blush from Milk Makeup. I'm obsessed with blush. I tend to over-apply. I've been doing that since before the e-girl trend. I was really into like hangover style makeup, so I tend to bring the blush all the way up here and blend it out. Just really like that sort of flushed look. At this point, Patrick Dolan of the Forlorn Hope proposes cannibalism for the first time. The other members were pretty horrified at that because his original plan was, oh, hey, let's pick someone to die and then we'll eat them. And everybody else in the group was like, whoa, don't really like that. How about instead we wait for someone to die and then we'll eat them? It turns out they did not have to wait long. Ironically, Patrick Dolan, the guy who was like, let's do cannibalism, he pretty quickly got eaten. Sorry, Pat. One important note is that Eddie and the Miwoks actually refused to eat any human flesh. So talk about sticking to your morals. And unfortunately, we have Louis and Salvador being murdered by the other members of the Forlorn Hope. Eddie tried to stop the pioneers, tried to save the Native Americans. He was ignored. They were the only cases in the Forlorn Hope where murder was turned to as a way to get meat. The other cases were, oh, this person's already died, so we might as well not waste it. I think it's extremely tragic that the Donner Party was also racist. And so that is why Louis and Salvador were really not talked about a whole lot when the news broke in the rest of the United States. People were just kind of like, oh, Native Americans, whatever. And that's really shitty. And I think that their names deserve to be remembered. They were genuinely just trying to help. They were murdered for simply because they had a different skin color and it was convenient. And I think that's really shitty. Stay hydrated. Remember James Reed? I had been banished. Well, somehow he'd stayed alive. I don't know. I could not have stayed alive, like wandering the Midwest by myself. He had made it to Sutter Fort. His wife and his kids were still out there with the Donner Party. So he organized rescue. He got to San Jose, which is actually where I live, so I think that's really cool. He organized a rescue party. He was able to take in about $1,300 in donations to pay the rescue party and pay for relief missions. Let's get them out of there. So the relief came in various waves. The first relief came, tried to take the most vulnerable people, the most sick, bring them over to Sutter Fort, brought some food, pretty uneventful. This was in February. In March, the second relief party comes in. This is where things get we saw in the Forlorn Hope there was cannibalism. This was independent of the group still camped out. The second relief party comes to Truckee Lake and finds that the situation is like deteriorated. A lot of people are going senile due to the really extreme conditions. A lot of people are very severely injured. There are records of blindness due to snow, records of like such severe frostbite that people would fall asleep with their feet in fire and not notice. Ouch. The most disturbing thing was they found a disembodied leg. A guy was just carrying it around. Jacob Donner had died. His kids needed to eat somehow. His wife was refusing to eat the food, so she was sickly and dying, but she wanted to make sure that her children survived at whatever cost, and so she was preparing her husband's organs for her children to eat, and so her kids were actually quite healthy, but I imagine the trauma of that would severely mess them up. Late March is the third relief. They make the note that there are still several survivors left at the camp. This is important. Kieseberg was one of these survivors. I'm just going to put on a little bit of sheer powder. So I put on very minimal, but that's it. Third relief, things start getting really janky because of our friend Kieseberg, who I talked about earlier. Kieseberg, they walked in on this guy making a meal out of someone's liver and lungs. That someone's liver and lungs were Tamsinnie Donner's. He had also stolen a bunch of money from the Donners' safekeeping guard area where they were keeping all their gold. They didn't want to carry it with them. Some of the migrants went to Sutter Fort. They left it there. And he had helped himself to that, as well as some weapons. He apparently openly admitted to murdering her. Records aren't super clear, but he admitted to it. It's hard because he also is known as a liar. He really liked to brag about things, whether they were true or not. The time that has passed since then, the sensationalism of this story, it's hard to know. But a lot of people think that he did murder Tamsinnie, which is really sad. Also, Foster and Eddie had come home and found that their children were dead, found that Eleanor was dead, and that was really, really hard. That must have been, like, so extremely tragic to be trying so hard to organize a rescue party and working around the clock to try and bring people to safety, and your family has entirely been eaten, including your children, which I think is another level of just, like, disgusting and horrible and sad. It's important to note that there were still survivors who were left behind. Even though Kieseberg was caught, like, openly eating people, they still left him there with other people, which I don't know why they would have thought that was a good idea. I wouldn't have done that. Whatever. Fourth relief comes in April. Only Kieseberg is left. He had eaten everyone else. He had eaten everyone else. It's not clear if he murdered them and then ate them, or if they died due to natural causes and then he ate them, but the fact of the matter is that he was the only one left alive, which is really sketchy considering that he also had some wounds. He also was injured due to various environmental factors. There were probably people who were stronger than him, but maybe just not as resourceful, if you can call it that. In June, a general by the name of Stephen Carey comes. He arrives to the camp to see what all happened, because this was kind of a big embarrassing thing for the Americans. He was so horrified at the remains of the camp, even though no one was there anymore. There were still a lot of bodies. There was all the supplies, just all this, like, horrible, gruesome leftover of what had happened there. And so he was so, like, disturbed, so deeply disgusted by all of this, that he threw it all into the last, like, 1 or 2 cabins left and had the entire thing just razed to the ground, just completely burned. Remember Lansford Hastings, the guy who, like, talked about how great this shortcut was? The shortcut that was not a shortcut and ended up adding hundreds of miles and, like, over a month of time to their trip. He was getting death threats sent at this point because the public had become aware of this tragedy. This is a Stila lipstick. I got it at Marshall's. I don't ever spend full price for things that I can buy at TJ Maxx or Marshall's. It's a little more glittery than I usually go. I'm normally one for a very, like, natural looking neutral color, but I do like it. I do like the brown. How's that? So when Hastings was confronted about his cutoff, he was quoted as being able to say nothing except for how terribly sorry he was and that he truly did not mean for this to happen, which I can understand. Like, I can't imagine that was ever his intent. Unfortunately, a dumb mistake that cost a ton of lives. Kieseberg, he has probably the most interesting story after all of this went down. He made it, he survived, his wife survived, neither their daughter nor their very young child, who his wife was pregnant with at the beginning of all this, neither of them survived. Kieseberg became notorious in California for bragging about his cannibalistic exploits, and how good human meat tasted, which really reads like the first episode of Bob's Burgers, when the bus pulls up of like weird food enthusiasts and they're like, we want to try human meat. That's Kieseberg. He is quoted as saying that human meat is the most delicious, sweetest kind of meat. He was actually legally accused of murder, but because the general had completely destroyed all the evidence when he burned it in a fire, there was just no evidence to prove that he had actually killed the people before he ate them. He escaped completely, like, no charges. Since Kieseberg had eaten William Eddy's wife, Eleanor, and his children, Eddy was thoroughly determined to murder him, which, you know, I would be mad also. He was talked out of it. I guess maybe he was a believer in karma. William Eddy went on to remarry and have another family, so I guess he kind of got a happy ending, but it was very sad. I'm sure he missed his first family very, very deeply and was horribly traumatized by everything that happened. Meanwhile, Kieseberg, he met Tamsin Donner's daughter, Eliza, in person, the daughter of the woman who he had likely murdered. He had confessed to murdering her, except in court. He wouldn't confess to it then. And then he ate her and claimed it was the best food he'd ever had. When meeting Eliza, he collapsed to his knees and cried and bawled and was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm the most horrible person. And she accepted his apology. I think it was probably a show. He was a really terrible person. I don't think he's to be believed in any situation. He was quoted as saying in 1895, right before he died in a hospital for the poor. He had absolutely nothing to his name. His reputation had been tarnished so horribly that, like, no one was really interested in hiring him. He was quoted as saying, I often think that the Almighty has singled me out among all the men on the face of the earth in order to see how much hardship, suffering, and misery a human being can bear. I'm sure Tamsin Donner and the other people you ate would agree. Not for you, though. So, that's it. That's the story of the Donner Party. It's a story of just a lot of really poor choices, sometimes unintentional, such as, oh, here's a shortcut, I think this is a shortcut that'll benefit us, and then it's not a shortcut. And sometimes it's an intentional shitty decision, like killing the Miwoks, the only two who knew their way around the land. Like, aside from horrible act of killing someone, Louis and Salvador were the only ones who knew, like, this part of the United States. So, stupid. My hair is stuck in my dress. Hello. I'm going to tie this in a bow. I'm not going out anywhere. I'm in quarantine. I guess that's it. This is my first time doing anything like this, so apologies if it's terrible. I hope you understood the story at least a little bit. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're interested, and I hope you're all staying safe and happy. Stay inside, wash your hands, wear your face mask. Have a wonderful day.